The moment Dr. Phil raised his hand and said, "Stop the tape," every camera operator froze. The audience, mid-breath, went silent. And the woman sitting across from him, a 47-year-old mother of 3 named Claire, clutched a worn envelope so tightly her knuckles turned white. No one in that studio, not the producers in the booth, not the audience members who'd been laughing moments before, and certainly not Dr. Phil himself, could have predicted what she was about to say. Because what started as a routine episode about family secrets was about to become one of the most shocking reveals in the show's history. But to understand why Dr. Phil stopped everything, why he broke protocol and sent his entire crew into chaos, we need to go back. Back to 3 hours earlier, when Claire first walked onto that stage, when no one knew the truth she'd been hiding for 23 years. It was a Tuesday morning in Los Angeles. The Dr. Phil show was taping an episode titled, "Family Lies That Destroy." Claire had been booked as a guest after her daughter sent an email to the show's producers. The email was simple. "My mother has been lying to our family for decades. She says she's ready to tell the truth, but she won't tell us first. She'll only say it on your show." The producers didn't know what the lie was. But something about that email felt different. And Dr. Phil trusts his team's instincts. Claire arrived at the studio with no family members. She requested to come alone. She wore a simple gray cardigan, jeans, and carried a small purse. Inside that purse was the envelope. The same envelope she'd kept hidden in a lockbox in her basement for over 2 decades. The same envelope that, once opened, would shatter the reality of everyone who loved her. Backstage, a producer named Monica did the pre-interview. Standard questions. What's the secret? Why now? What do you hope Dr. Phil can help you with? But Claire's answers were vague, evasive. She kept saying, "I'll explain on stage. I need to say it in front of everyone, or I won't be able to say it at all." Monica felt uneasy. She went to Dr. Phil's dressing room. "Something's off with this guest," she said. "I think she's holding back something big." Dr. Phil looked up from his notes. "Then let's find out what it is. Get her on stage." The cameras rolled. The audience settled. Dr. Phil walked out to applause, his signature confidence filling the room. He sat down, looked at Claire, and opened with his usual directness. "Claire, your daughter says you've been lying to your family for 23 years. Let's start there. What's the lie?" Claire hesitated. Her hands shook. She looked down at her lap, then back up at Dr. Phil. I don't know how to say this." "Just say it," Dr. Phil said, his tone firm but not unkind. "You came here to tell the truth. So tell it." Claire took a breath. "When I was 24 years old, I got married. It was a small ceremony, just me and him and a witness. No family. No friends. Just us." The audience waited. Dr. Phil leaned forward slightly. "Okay. And 3 months later he disappeared. Just vanished. No note. No phone call. Nothing. I never saw him again." Dr. Phil paused. The audience shifted uncomfortably. This wasn't what anyone expected. "So you're saying you were married, your husband left, and you never told your family?" Dr. Phil asked. "No," Claire said, her voice cracking. "I never told anyone. Not my parents. Not my friends. And not the man I married 6 years later. The man I'm still married to. The father of my 3 children." The studio went dead silent. You could hear the hum of the stage lights. Dr. Phil's expression didn't change, but his eyes sharpened. "Wait. Are you telling me you're still legally married to the first man?" Claire nodded, tears streaming down her face. "I never got a divorce. I didn't know how. I was terrified. And then years passed, and I met David, and I loved him, and I just pretended the first marriage never happened." The audience gasped. A woman in the front row covered her mouth. Dr. Phil sat back in his chair, processing. Then he did something he rarely does. He looked directly at the camera operator. "Stop the tape," Everything froze. The cameras stopped rolling. The producers in the booth exchanged confused glances. Dr. Phil stood up, walked over to Claire, and knelt beside her chair. This wasn't part of the show anymore. This was a human being in crisis, and Dr. Phil wasn't going to exploit that for television. He was going to help her. "Claire," he said quietly, his voice barely audible to the audience. "Do you have proof of this first marriage?" She reached into her purse with trembling hands and pulled out the envelope. The envelope she'd been carrying for 23 years. She handed it to Dr. Phil. He opened it carefully. Inside was a marriage certificate, dated 1999, signed by Claire and a man named Michael Sutton. The ink was faded, the paper yellowed, but it was real. It was legal. And it meant that Claire's entire life for the past 2 decades had been built on a lie. Dr. Phil looked at the certificate, then at Claire, then at his producer Monica, who had walked onto the stage. "Get legal on the phone," he said. "Now. And get a family therapist in here. We're not continuing this episode until we figure out what she needs. Subscribe and leave a comment, because the most powerful part of this story is still ahead." Monica nodded and disappeared backstage. The audience sat in stunned silence. Dr. Phil turned back to Claire. "Does David know you're here today?" "No," Claire whispered. "He thinks I'm visiting my sister." "And your kids?" "They know I'm on the show. But they don't know why. They think it's about something else. Something smaller." Dr. Phil shook his head, not in judgment, but in disbelief at the weight she'd been carrying. "Claire, you've been living with this for 23 years. That's not a lie. That's a prison." She broke down completely, sobbing. The kind of crying that comes from a place so deep, it's been locked away for decades. Dr. Phil didn't move. He stayed beside her, one hand on the armrest of her chair, waiting. The audience didn't applaud. They didn't gasp. They just watched, as if they were witnessing something sacred. After a few minutes, Monica returned with a phone. "Legal is on the line," she said. Dr. Phil took the phone and stepped off stage, speaking in low tones. The audience could see him nodding, asking questions, pacing slightly. When he returned, his face was unreadable. He sat back down across from Claire. "Okay. Here's where we are. You're still legally married to Michael Sutton. That means your marriage to David is not legally valid. You're what's called a bigamist, even though you didn't intend to be. But here's the thing, Claire, intent matters. You didn't do this to hurt anyone. You did it because you were scared and overwhelmed and didn't know how to fix it. And now, we're going to fix it." Claire looked up at him, her eyes red and swollen. "How?" "First, we're going to find Michael Sutton. We're going to track him down, wherever he is, and we're going to get you a legal divorce. Then, we're going to make sure your marriage to David is legally recognized. And then, we're going to get you into therapy, because carrying a secret like this for 23 years doesn't just disappear overnight. You're going to need help processing this. And so is your family." Claire nodded, unable to speak. Dr. Phil turned to the audience. "This is why I do this show. Not for the drama. Not for the ratings. But for moments like this. When someone finally has the courage to tell the truth, no matter how painful it is. Because the truth, no matter how ugly, is always better than a lie." The audience erupted into applause. Not the polite, obligatory kind. The real kind. The kind that says, "We see you. We hear you. And we're with you." But Dr. Phil wasn't done. He turned to the camera, the one that was still rolling, even though he'd called a stop earlier, and he spoke directly to the viewers at home. "If you're watching this and you're carrying a secret, listen to me. It doesn't matter how long you've been holding it. It doesn't matter how scared you are to tell it. The longer you wait, the heavier it gets. And eventually it will crush you. Don't let that happen. Tell the truth. Get help. And know that there are people, like me, like my team, like the people in your life who love you, who will stand by you when you do." He turned back to Claire. "Are you ready to tell David?" She took a shaky breath. I don't know. Then we'll do it together. I'll be right there with you. We'll call him. Right now. On this stage. And we'll tell him the truth. Because you're not doing this alone anymore. Claire nodded. Dr. Phil gestured to Monica, who brought out a phone. The studio was so quiet you could hear the dial tone. The phone rang once. Twice. Then a man's voice. Hello? David, this is Dr. Phil. I'm here with your wife, Claire. She has something she needs to tell you. And I want you to listen, okay? Just listen. David's voice was confused, cautious. Okay. Dr. Phil handed the phone to Claire. She held it with both hands like it might slip away. And then, in front of millions of viewers, she told her husband the truth. Every word. Every detail. The first marriage. The disappearance. The 23 years of silence. And when she finished, there was nothing but silence on the other end of the line. Finally, David spoke. His voice was shaking. Are you telling me we're not really married? Legally, no, Claire said, her voice barely a whisper. But in every other way, yes. I love you, David. I've always loved you. And I'm so sorry. Another long silence. Then, I need time to process this. I understand, Claire said. But Claire, David added, his voice softer now. I'm not going anywhere. We'll figure this out. Together. Claire burst into tears again. Dr. Phil took the phone back. David, I'm going to connect you with our legal team and our therapists. We're going to help both of you through this. You're not alone in this. Thank you, Dr. Phil, David said. And then the line went dead. Dr. Phil set the phone down. He looked at Claire, then at the audience, then at the cameras. This, he said, is what real life looks like. It's messy. It's complicated. It's painful. But it's also full of hope. Because when you face the truth, no matter how hard it is, you give yourself the chance to heal. And that's what Claire is doing today. She's choosing healing over hiding. And that takes more courage than most people will ever understand. The audience gave her a standing ovation. Claire stood, shaking, and Dr. Phil embraced her. It wasn't scripted. It wasn't planned. It was just two human beings, in a moment of profound vulnerability, acknowledging the weight of what had just happened. Share and subscribe. Make sure this story is never forgotten. After the cameras stopped rolling for real this time, Dr. Phil took Claire backstage. He introduced her to a legal advocate who specialized in cases like hers. He connected her with a therapist who had experience with long-term secret keeping and its psychological effects. And he personally called David again, off camera, to make sure he had the resources he needed too. 3 months later, Claire returned to the show for a follow-up episode. Michael Sutton had been found. He was living in Oregon, remarried himself, and had no idea Claire had never filed for divorce. When he learned the truth, he immediately signed the paperwork. Claire and David legally remarried in a small ceremony with their 3 children present. And for the first time in 23 years, Claire said she felt free. Dr. Phil opened that follow-up episode with a simple statement. This is why I do what I do. Not to embarrass people. Not to judge them. But to help them find a way out of the darkness. Claire found her way out. And if you're still in the dark, I want you to know, there's a way out for you too. The envelope Claire had carried for 23 years was no longer in her purse. She had given it to Dr. Phil as a symbol. He kept it in his office, not as a trophy, but as a reminder. A reminder that behind every secret is a person in pain. And that sometimes, all it takes to end that pain is one moment of courage. One decision to tell the truth. And one person willing to stand beside you when you do. That envelope still sits on Dr. Phil's desk today. And every time he sees it, he remembers Claire. And he remembers why he does this work. Because some stories aren't just stories. They're lifelines. And this was one of them.